Welcome to English Podcasts with Chris
and Sue.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, Sue.
Well, in the previous podcast, we were talking about different apps.
Yeah.
And one I mentioned was one called Headspace,
Yeah.
which is to help with mindfulness, being calm and things. It sounds really great. Give it a thumbs up. And then I thought to myself, actually, what is mindfulness?
That's a very good question because everybody's using it. There's another one called Calm, which is apparently the biggest one on the App Store for this type of thing, I think. But mindfulness, apparently, is the practice of being fully present and engaged in the present moment. That is, not thinking about what you got to do, what you should have done, stuff like that. It's like now. And it's really engaging without judgment and no attachment to anything apart from how you feel at the moment. It can be things like thinking about your breathing, how you feel, are you hot, are you cold, for example. And it's really thinking about your surroundings and your thoughts with a sense of openness, curiosity, and acceptance.
Okay, well, I find that kind of okay if you're sort of sitting cross-legged on your rug in your lounge in your living room.
Why cross-legged? Why do you say
Because
that?
I'm going a bit zen.
Okay, well,
Going a bit zen.
Funnily enough, mindfulness has its roots in Buddhism.
I wasn't far wrong.
You're not
Fit,
too.
was I? But I have seen as well how mindfulness can have an impact on learning a language, learning a new language. What do you think about that?
I totally agree.
Do you?
Well, if you think about it, it's learning to live fully in the present moment, then already we're learning. Yeah. And I think the problem with a lot of language learning is that people do it. Like, for example, people will listen to a podcast or, any podcast. I mean, the best ones are obviously English podcasts, as we know, but they'll listen to any podcast. And then it will be a case of, I've done it, and that's it. There could be some questions in it, but it stays there. Whereas I think that with listening, there's so much more. And if you look at the way that a lot of sort of language schools, etc., work on listening, I think it's not really helpful because there's always a wrong and the right answer, whereas in real life, there isn't.
Unless it's the bus timetable, and then there is a wrong or right answer.
How often do you listen to the bus timetable?
Yeah, well, you'd read that for
You
sure.
would, yeah.
You would for sure. Because I have to say, I'm not really a big fan of mindfulness and language learning.
Why?
Well, because I think when people learn as adults, when they learn a new language, they are quite stressed out. And however much we work on reducing stress and, let's say, breathing and accepting yourself, really. That's what people have to accept themselves. I don't think people come to the lessons, the sessions, wanting to know grammar, wanting to pick up some new words. And I don't think this idea of mindfulness really, really helps them a lot. What do you think?
I sort of disagree.
Okay.
I don't think language learning is about memorizing vocabulary or mastering grammar. And you'll see a lot of children, for example, when they go to, I've seen examples with people, in my clients and other people, where the kids have gone to live in England and they've picked up the language. First of all, lots of resistance, crying when they heard English. And then they get to play, they use the language. So there's some sort of mindfulness going on because they're accepting things. They're accepting that people are talking differently, and they just pick up the language very, very quickly and they get integrated.
Yeah.
Okay, kids' brains have got more plasticity than adults, that's sure. And that's why I think that adults need to use more mindfulness. They need to, like, for example, mindful listening is not about getting it right, even though for exams and tests you have to. But, it's about being really, really present in that moment and listening to things. For example, people just go for one thing, that is to understand. Okay, I'll accept that, in the end, we want to understand something. But in order to be able to understand, you need to be able to hear the language.
Yeah.
And in order to hear the language, there are different things that make it more difficult. So if you take things like emotions, when people are excited or angry or happy or whatever, they can speak faster. And you'll hear people, when they get angry, an accent comes out and you say, I didn't realize they had, it came from, I don't know, wherever, that comes out. It's more difficult to understand in those situations. People think because it's stressful situations. Not often that. It's because people speak faster because of that.
Yeah.
And so I think what people need to do, they need to be able to think about language learning as more of a journey rather than a right and wrong.
Absolutely right. And I think you put your finger on it when you said people have to accept themselves on when they start learning.
Well, that's difficult to do.
Very, 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 very. And people, I always say with learning a language, it's one of the, I'm going to call it a school subject, totally different to like geography or, mathematics.
Yeah.
English, learning, I'm going to say English, people get so emotional about it, so emotional. And I can see how the idea of mindfulness can come and help them to keep calm. But I'm not sure about this idea of like staying in the present moment.
Well, the thing is, if they're not in this present moment, right? If they're thinking about, I must cook the dinner, or
I
I
see.
must do this and whatever, then there's almost no point them sort of getting down to listening. They have to be ready, but they also have to, one of the most simple things is that I use this example quite often. I remember working with a guy in the past, and he came in and he said, I've been listening to this thing about gardening. And I said, oh, you like gardening? He said, no, I hate it. I said, so why did you listen to it? And it's about getting things which interest us, because we've got to have some curiosity.
Absolutely.
If we want to find out stuff, we need to be curious about it. If we're not interested, I mean, the royal family, for example, is it called? No, the Crown. The Crown totally doesn't interest me. When somebody starts talking about that, because they were talking about it today, about it not winning BAFTAs or whatever, I don't care. I really don't care. And I totally switched off. And then they started speaking on the news about something that I actually was interested in. And, you tune in and tune out. But the thing is, with mindful listening, instead of rushing through to I've listened to this thing, that's it, I've done it. Maybe think about taking a moment to really listen to the sounds.
Yes.
There are things that people don't understand, which is very often liaison between different words. They often don't understand, or they don't hear things like negations.
Yeah.
You say, I don't want to do that. What are we saying? I'm not saying I don't want to do that. We don't speak like that.
No.
And so it's really getting into the sounds, the rhythms, and the nuance of language, and notice how it sort of, what is the impact on you, and just let themselves be fully immersed in the experience. And what people don't do, like, they don't even look at the titles of stuff. Like if you were to look at a title and it was talking about, give me any subject. Go on, give me.
You want me to give you a subject?
I do.
Well, one that we've just done, let's say food preferences.
Okay, there you go. So what you could start doing is thinking about, what are people going to be talking about?
Yes.
But before you even listen, like my thing would be that marzipan, for example.
Yeah.
I hate marzipan. It's the only thing I hate in the world. You know this stuff?
I do.
I love almonds, but I hate marzipan. And I would think, I wonder if they're going to talk about marzipan.
Yeah.
Very often they don't.
I think for me, that's what I would call a concrete, useful tip, more than mindfulness. But I agree with you.
No, but it's starting to get engaged with the stuff.
Get engaged,
You're
okay.
in that moment.
Oh,
What are they
okay.
going to be possibly speaking about?
Okay.
It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying is when we're listening to stuff, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. But you've got an idea.
Yes.
At least an idea.
No, I think that's a very, very useful tip.
You're not just like an innocent bystander listening to this thing.
No.
You're starting to engage with it even before you start listening.
Yes.
I mean, I would, if people are talking about food preferences, I would think they'll be started talking about things like offal, for example, liver, heart, stuff like this. I love it, but I know that a lot of people don't like it, and I'm sure they'd be talking about that. They probably wouldn't be talking about marzipan. But anyway,
And I think that's very useful. And also, I think people need to, when we say be in the moment, you talked about the future, like what's going to be happening. But I think they need to accept or get rid of negative learning experiences in the past that they've had.
Difficult to do.
Oh, so difficult. But if people can, as adults, seem to get rid of their school, what happened to them, bad things at school,
Yeah.
forget it, forget it. And people come with a lot of negative worries.
Yeah. And also, when you think about a lot of these things, they would also have like a cultural aspect on it. Like, for example, if you were to talk about in France, food hell and food heaven or whatever, just going on that example that you gave, then it would probably be very, very different in France
Yeah.
to the UK.
Yes.
And so you're sort of getting that cultural thing as well. And the thing is, if you know something in your own sort of culture or your own language, then it's quite interesting to find out from, through the sort of the bias of another language to see what goes on there.
Yes.
So it's really about, getting a wide range of stuff. And then you can, in terms of mindfulness, like, do I agree with it?
Yeah.
How does it make me feel, for example? But if you're not in the moment, if you're not thinking in the moment, then you're probably going to be too stressed. And when you're stressed, you don't hear stuff.
Yeah. But for me, as a kind of a summary of this, useful points like breathing, getting rid of negative learning experiences, really concentrating on the moment, what you're doing. I think there are certain aspects of which I think are very good, but people want to come to learning sessions with grammar and vocabulary in mind always.
Well, yeah, okay, but I mean, what I would say is, what's stopping them learning it themselves?
Yeah.
You can't speak for people.
No.
You can't write for people. You can't read for people. All you can do is to help them to speak and to improve on that. And maybe sometimes they get things a little bit wrong, and we might have an idea of how to help them with that. But if you're going to, I'll say, a language course or language lessons to learn grammar and to learn vocabulary, then I think you're probably not going to be too effective at the end of the day.
I totally agree.
I think there's more help with like the learning to learn, and mindfulness is part of that, in my opinion. When you're listening, you should be thinking about emotions.
Yeah.
What emotions does it trigger with you?
Definitely.
But not being, in any way judgmental about it, and being totally, sort of aware and listening and trying to hear the language first of all. And that's what people don't do. They want to go straight to understanding, but it's impossible. And they often get quite frustrated because they miss a word or whatever. They don't do that in their own language.
No.
And if they hear somebody speaking in English, it's always going to be, oh, I didn't understand that. Whereas in their own language, they will say, oh, I didn't catch that, I didn't hear it, or I couldn't be bothered to listen to it, or whatever.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And there's a massive fear of not understanding.
Yeah, and I mean, some of it could be like the words that they miss could be like the name of a Greek restaurant or whatever,
No, anyway.
But because they block after that, then it doesn't work. But I think they should, maybe take a moment to reflect on their language learning and how they can infuse more mindfulness in the way that they're learning, especially listening, because listening is the big key.
Sure.
Because when the ear works, everything works.
Sure.
And how can they cultivate a deeper connection to the language and themselves? I know it sounds very philosophic, and it sounds like I'm sat cross-legged on a, shag pile carpet in front of the fire. But no, I really believe that. And it's not just about reaching that destination, but it's all the bits along the way. And there's a lot of positives in it because you can learn a lot of stuff. I know that when I speak English, but when I look at BBC 6 Minute English or TED Talks or whatever, I just can't stop because there's so much there that interests me.
Yes.
And I'll just have a listen to this. The title brings out something, and I subconsciously, I think like, oh, I wonder what that's about. I bet it's about this. I bet it's not about this or whatever. Or like it can be like, well, I just don't know what the hell it is. And you listen to it, and it's thoroughly enjoyable. And people need to do that. So basically, the approach needs to be curiosity, compassion, and mindfulness.
Okay. Amen to that.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review.
To catch all the latest from English podcasts, you can follow us on Instagram at english.podcasts and on YouTube at english-podcasts.
And visit our website at english-podcast.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.